Welcome into the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Today is Wednesday, May the 21st. I'm Zach Ewing with the Advocates LSU baseball beat writer Koki Riley. Here to talk a little more baseball. Now we're officially in the postseason, Koki, although we'll talk about it. The SEC tournament kind of feels like it's like you're taking a gap here between the regular season and the postseason. So LSU will be in Hoover, but I don't know that they have a lot to play for. Is that blasphemous to say that?
I don't think that's blasphemous. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to win a game. That would really help, fortify things even more if they're not already fortified. But they're going into this at such a almost pretty much an unprecedented advantage. The fact that they don't have to play till Friday night. They're literally the last team in the tournament to play in the tournament. And because of that, they can just go about this weekend and this tournament the same way they would for a weekend series. They're only going to play a maximum of 3 games, and it's the opposite of last year in almost every single way.
Yeah, it's the SEC tournament already started yesterday on Tuesday. It's going on as we speak here Wednesday morning, but LSU doesn't play till Friday night, so the format has changed. We're going to talk about that, exactly what LSU wants to get out of this weekend, and then we'll also kind of preview selection Monday coming up, and we'll also talk a little bit of LSU softball, which is obviously not as good of news. But we start here, Koki. LSU takes 2 out of 3 at South Carolina to end the regular season. They are number 1 in all of the major polls to end the season. They did lose via walk-off to the Gamecocks on Thursday night, which is, South Carolina finished 6-24 in the league. Is that right? So you almost feel like, oh man, we really wanted to sweep that team, but I don't know that you can, especially on the road, expect a sweep. So all in all, LSU kind of went out there and took care of business.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. They took care of business. It wasn't the prettiest series from them, just from a performance standpoint. Even the game that they won 8-1, there was some stuff early on that was like, all right, this is still sort of residue from the last game. And then in the finale, there were times where I think South Carolina even had a brief lead at the start of the game, and the offense got off to a really slow start. So there's definitely, it wasn't a perfect series by any means, but they did just enough to where they can go into this weekend not, feeling too much pressure.
Yeah, it feels almost like, and I don't want to make this sound like it's every player and coach, but just sort of collectively, LSU's like the rest of us, where they're like, okay, is it postseason time yet? Like, we're just sort of biding. They took the series from Tennessee and Arkansas at home, kind of solidified that top 8 seed. Now it's like, all right, can we get through this? And I wonder if we're going to see the same thing in Hoover. But before we get there, it just goes to show you how wide open this year is. And we talked about it with Rab last week, but LSU's kind of, I guess you call them consensus number 1 team in the country. I don't think they're number 1 in every single poll, but it's pretty close. And yet they only finished 3rd in the SEC. It's not like their non-conference is lifting them up, because their non-conference schedule wasn't that great. So just the fact that LSU is number 1 without really feeling like they're this dominant team goes to show you how wide open this tournament might be, talking about the national tournament.
And I wrote about this a little bit in my takeaway story, where does it really matter that they're number 1? No, but I also think it kind of reflects maybe the attitude or the national perception of this team, whether that's right or not, whether that should be used or not when it comes to determining the top 8 seeds, right? Because if you're in the committee and you see that this team's number 1 in every single poll, like, how much effort are you going to put into being like, well, they don't deserve to be in the top 8?
Yeah, there's only so far you can drop them, right? Before the outcry would be like, how did the number 1 team get the?
Well, yeah,
forget even top 8. Like, can you even drop them to 6, 7, 8? Like, they almost have to be top 5.
Yeah, like, should that matter? No, but at the same time, does it matter? Yes. Like, that's kind of what I'm saying here. And like, they should be picking teams based on merit and how they did during the season, and it's the 8 most deserving, and I still think LSU is within the 8 most deserving. But if we're talking about all the perception stuff that like being number 1 in the polls, and how well you're playing towards the end of the season, and all this stuff that may or may not end up actually mattering, they're checking those boxes as well. That's kind of my point.
Yeah, and I wonder, if they were to lose Friday night in their first SEC tournament game, maybe they drop a couple of spots. Like if Arkansas or Texas wins the SEC tournament, maybe LSU's not number one in the final poll. But at some point, I don't know that it matters as far as seeding goes, because the committee is going to do a lot of work. They've already done a lot of work as far as seeding. They probably have a ceiling and a floor for each team already in there. And I doubt LSU's floor is lower than 8, which is really the cutoff point for where it matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't think they're going to be the number 1 overall seed, because they're number 7 and they're number 7 or 8 in RPI right now. They're number 7 in KPI as of the end of last weekend. So I think, like, kind of because of that, because the metrics don't love them as much as the polls do, like, there's a bit of a dissonance there, and that's enough of a dissonance for me to not think they're going to be the number 1 overall seed unless they win the SEC tournament, basically. But again, like, that doesn't totally matter whether the number 1 overall seed or not. They just got to be in the top 8.
So let's dig into the SEC tournament. It started yesterday, Tuesday. There were no upsets. Alabama beat Missouri.
Missouri was close for a while there, though.
Yeah,
they had a lead.
Had the bases loaded at the end of the game. It might have been the best game of the day, actually.
Yeah.
Florida hammered South Carolina pretty good, and then Oklahoma beat Kentucky, which was the most significant result of the day, in that Kentucky's kind of on the NCAA bubble, and so they go out in one game. And so you could see that's kind of the line between 13 and 14 SEC teams in the tournament, is whether does Kentucky get in. And I have to
more
think
like 12 and 13, because the 14th team would have been Texas A&M.
I'm sorry, 12 and 13. And I'm kind of leaning toward Kentucky maybe out at this point, but we'll see. We'll see what happens around the country.
Yeah.
Texas A&M was going to play the late game last night. That got rained out. They're playing right now as we speak. By the time you listen to this, that game's probably over. So they're playing Mississippi State. The winner of that game then plays Auburn on Thursday, and the winner of that game plays LSU.
Yeah,
or does it?
Yes.
Does Auburn play Wednesday or Thursday?
Now they play Thursday.
Okay, now it's a Thursday morning,
of the rain delay.
And so they will play Thursday morning, and then the winner of that game. So it'll be Auburn, Texas A&M, or Mississippi State. Again, by the time y'all are listening to this, you know it's who Auburn's going to play in that game. But here's my question. Does LSU need to win a game to feel totally comfortable about that top 8 seed? Do they need to win a game just to kind of feel good about themselves and not only have one game over like a 2-week stretch before the regional? I mean, what's the importance of this Friday game?
I think the feel good is better than feel comfortable, because the feel comfortable is about whether they're going to be a top 8 seed or not. And I think they should feel comfortable about that right now, even if they lose. Feel good about it is you just feel good about your team heading into the NCAA tournament if you win this game.
Yeah, so. And I think, like, we should. The format has changed, for those who don't know. SEC baseball tournament is now all single elimination. All 16 teams get in. 9 through 16 have to play that first round game. Then 5 through 8 get 1 bye, and 1 through 4, including LSU, get 2 byes. And so the equation has changed, where in previous years you really had to kind of worry about, boy, do we even want to go deep into this tournament, because we're going to have to burn a bunch of pitching. We might have to play like 6 games, late nights, early mornings. Like, do we really want to exhaust ourselves for a team in LSU's position, or Arkansas or Texas, where your national seed is secure anyway, and the results don't matter, other than, hey, we could win another trophy, which is cool, but not our ultimate goal. This year it's a little bit different, because for those teams, for Texas, Arkansas, LSU, and who's the 4th team with a bye?
Texas, Arkansas, LSU, and
totally drawing a blank here.
Vanderbilt.
Vandy, thank you. So for those 4 teams, the max you could play is 3 games. As you said at the top, just a regular weekend series. LSU could go Cade Anderson, Anthony Ianson, and then whatever they want to do on Sunday, Chase Shore, Zach Cowan, however they want to do that. It would just be another series. The rest wouldn't be messed up. I mean, like, you're not going to play again until next Thursday. So maybe there's a little bit of like Friday to Thursday. Maybe the regional doesn't even start till Friday. Like, you're not affecting anything like that. In fact, you could make an argument that you would be sticking to regular routine by winning the tournament. So I'm curious to see how Jay Johnson approaches this.
Yeah, absolutely. And what helps them even more is that it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's like, but because like even Vanderbilt and Texas have to deal with the Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and obviously it's better to play on Thursday than it would be on Tuesday or Wednesday. But, LSU by getting the 2 or the 3 seed, so them and Arkansas are in this boat where they don't play until Friday. Like even Texas getting the number 1 overall seed, they still have to play on a Thursday, and they still have to sort of figure out how that's going to work out. So, yeah, I mean, it should be interesting.
Yeah, I think, and Jay Johnson much better than I do. I don't think he personally cares too much if they win this tournament this weekend. I'm not saying they're not trying to win.
Yeah.
But the eye is on Omaha, right? That's the goal. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
100%. And I wouldn't say he would like admit that publicly, but he would go as far as saying like, if we're in a situation where we feel like we're stretching a guy at all, we're going to pull him.
You are not going to see Cade Anderson throw 135 pitches.
No, you're not.
You will not see that. You won't even see him throw 105.
You probably won't. Probably not, yeah.
Now, having said that, like I said, I mean, I don't think it's bad to just treat this as a normal weekend series, try to win every game, get all of your pitchers, their normal amount of work, unless you've got a guy who is, sore or banged up or whatever the case might be. And, you feel like he needs the weekend off. But it's almost as detrimental to me to only play the one game. And then you have a bunch of pitchers who haven't pitched, like I said, in almost 2 weeks by the time you get to the regional.
Yeah. Exactly, and I totally agree. And you'd have to just go, extend bullpens and do all this sort of stuff if they don't win that first game, or for example, especially. So I think ideally you win that first game because you give Cade and Anthony, some sort of game in between the last game of the regular season and last weekend of the regular season and the regional. So
we'll see. We'll see how much LSU wants to emphasize it. Again, they will play either Auburn or Texas A&M or Mississippi State. The viewer knows more than we do about which one of those teams it will be because Texas A&M and Mississippi State are playing right now. That game will be, as of right now, will be Friday night. There's a game, I think, at 4:30, and then the LSU game would be the second game after that, so probably about 8 o'clock. Unless there were further rain delays, which there are never rain delays in Hoover in late May. That never happens. So, LSU might not even play till Saturday. We don't know. Like that, and honestly, to me, that kind of changes the equation on this. Where you're going, man, I don't want to be playing double headers and stuff. But still, I do think LSU probably goes in again, not winning at all costs, but certainly trying to compete. And if you end up with a trophy at the end of the weekend to put in your trophy case, then great.
Yeah. Absolutely. You said it perfectly.
What do you want to see from LSU on the field? What because we talked about the South Carolina series briefly where LSU just didn't seem to be firing on all cylinders. Who or what would you like to see be better this weekend?
The offense. And we've talked about this almost ad nauseum, but like the fate of this team is going to come down to how much they hit. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you want to be at home when you hit, because this team is averaging 7 to 8 runs a game when they're at home in SEC play, when opposed to when they're on the road in SEC play, where it's that number's closer to 3 or 4, and that makes a huge difference because we know the record that this team has, how good they are in games where they score 5 or more runs. They've only lost 2 games all year where that's the case, against South Carolina pitching staff, that is one of the worst pitching staffs, and I guess Power 4, Power 5 baseball, however you want to describe it, to never get to 10 or more runs in any of those games is definitely at least a little bit, should be at least a little bit concerning. And I think the pitching staff is more or less fine. I know it wasn't a very pretty day on that Thursday game, but you also got a very promising performance from Jaden Newt. Another shutout inning or 2 from Chase Shores. It wasn't. Zach Cowan's inability to hold a 2-run lead was kind of the problem that game, and you still have seen mostly good stuff from him. Outside of 2 weekends. So I think overall it's the offense and just trying to find some consistency on that side of the ball, and to I don't say struggle, because they did hit some balls out of the park and they got a little bit unlucky early in the series, but just lack of consistency on that side of the ball. And, the fact that that just clearly is not the strength of the team right now. Like, if you can get that side going, this team can win the whole thing. But if you can't, then, they'll probably make it to Omaha because they're at home and all that sort of jazz, but it's going to be hard to win the whole thing or be considered as one of the top contenders for it if they can't really get that offense going.
Any other SEC tournament thoughts? Again, it's a little awkward to be recording this while Texas A&M is playing.
Yeah.
To me, they're one of the stories of the weekend. How much of a run can they make? But what have you?
I'm pretty skeptical that they can make a run. Obviously, they already have Grahovac, who's out, and now without Caden Sorrell either, that's like 2 of their 3 best hitters or something like that who are out. And they have to basically win the tournament to make the NCAA tournament. So I just don't see that happening. I know they're more desperate than everybody else right now, but it's a long road to go for them. Like Ryan Prager, I think, is starting today. He's their ace, so they won't have him available if they go further on in this tournament. So
they got to win 5 games now in 5 days. So that will not be easy. But to me, they're the story. Kentucky's lost. Everybody else just kind of playing for seeding. And so I think it's not like LSU's going to be at this giant disadvantage by saying, we're not pushing guys. Pretty much everybody else in the tournament will be in that boat too, especially now that you have, like South Carolina, Missouri are the teams, they're out. Texas A&M, Kentucky.
I guess you could argue that like Auburn's playing for a top 8 and like Ole Miss is playing for like a top 16. But like if Auburn wins their game and they play LSU, then they'll have kind of sealed that up anyway. They maybe have sealed that up anyway. So
if I'm Jay Johnson, and he's a lot smarter than I am, but I'm given Cade Anderson, is 5 innings, 70 to 80 pitches. I'm giving Anthony Ianson 5 innings, 70 to 80 pitches, assuming you win. And then I'm just filling in the rest with, like the guys you're talking about. Does Zach Cowan need a weekend of rest, or do we just need to see him make a mechanical adjustment to figure out whatever's been?
I think it's better for him to pitch,
ailing him.
Yeah,
okay,
because he didn't throw that many pitches even this past weekend, even though he got hit around. You know what I mean? So it's not like you're tiring him out too much. If anything, you need to try to fix him.
And then you just sort of I'm giving Shores a couple of innings. I'm giving Newt a couple of innings.
Yeah.
I'm giving, some of these guys, Schmidt and Rizzi and whoever else, if I'm Jay Johnson, I want to know who's in good form as I go to the games that are really going to matter next week.
I think Newt is definitely in that category now. Like Newt getting 12 straight outs against a South Carolina lineup that obviously isn't that great, but it is, I guess, the relative strength of their team. He sat 12 up, 12 down, and came in with the bases loaded, nobody out at one point, and only gave up 1 inhitter to run the score. Granted, they left him in there maybe a little bit too long, and he started giving up some runs here and there. But if he can be a multi-inning reliever for you, that changes. That really helps out your bullpen depth. It's a huge boost for them. So
Koki,
maybe you want to extend him this weekend and just try to turn him to like a 3 or 4 inning guy.
Let him eat. Let him eat.
Yeah, let him eat. Why not?
I would honestly use this weekend a bit to experiment. You want to give your regular guys their work. You're not trying to lose. You want to win the games, but it's experimenting. Koki, before we go to break, who wins the SEC baseball tournament?
Oh boy, Arkansas. I don't know, honestly. But then if LSU won, Ianson would face Arkansas again. We know how that turned out last time. So I don't think it's Texas. I'll say that. Maybe Vanderbilt. I don't know.
Could I throw out a vote for Tennessee? I know that's not going to be popular, but they feel like the team that wants to go up there and kind of right some wrongs.
That's true, but the pitching depth is a huge problem,
and they've got to win 4 games. Yeah, they got to win 4.
They got to win 4. So
in fact, they play the game after that game may have already started by the time you're listening to this too. They play Alabama at 12:30 or something this afternoon. So that game's probably already started.
I think Phillips is going to start that game. So.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see who really puts their foot down on the gas pedal this weekend and who kind of eases off. And I think LSU is in the eases off category. So.
Yeah, which is maybe you could pick LSU because they just have their top 2 starters lined up perfectly in a row like that, and maybe Cade Anderson gets some revenge on Auburn or something. You can make an argument for LSU too. Trying to predict this thing is kind of impossible though because of all the who's trying and who's not stuff that we're talking about here.
I would say it's less impossible than it used to be when there was was single elimination, and now it's double elimination, and now it's single elimination again.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad they've simplified the format. I will say that.
So Jay Johnson, Rob Vaughn, and Tim Corbin. Corbin's the Vanderbilt coach. Rob Vaughn's the Alabama coach. Those are the only three who voted against changing it to the single elimination format. They wanted to keep the single, double, single. So everyone else wanted.
What was
the single.
Have you asked Jay about that? What was his? Because he seems to be the type of guy who would want to be more.
I forget why. I forget the reason why exactly off the top of my head, because you're kind of putting me on the spot here. But
that's what this is all about.
Yeah, that's fair.
We'll have to get.
But he does have. He has talked about why he voted for it.
We will get Jay Johnson back on the podcast in the offseason, and we will ask him that question.
Yeah, I like that.
But in the meantime, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk some NCAA tournament seeding, maybe what we expect for the Baton Rouge Regional next week. And we're also going to touch on LSU softball on the LSU Sports Insider. Back after this.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. With quick picks, you can tap right into pre-built, ready-to-bet parlays right from the home screen. And if you miss tip-off, no worries. You can play same-game parlays live during the action. Plus, it's never been easier to find and bet on the biggest matchups of the day, so you can keep up with all the action. Caesars Sportsbook, proud partner of the NBA and the only sportsbook app with Caesars Rewards. Download it today.
Welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Zach Ewing with Koki Riley here in our Baton Rouge studios, talking a little LSU baseball. Be sure to subscribe to our LSU Sports at NOLA.com YouTube channel. Hit the like button for us. Smash it, as the kids say. Smash that like button. And leave a comment. Let us know who you want to see in LSU's regional, what you think they will do in Hoover this weekend, besides stare at the rain, which will probably happen at some point. When does LSU travel up there?
Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
They go up today. Today is Wednesday.
Yes.
You go up tomorrow.
I go up tomorrow. Yes.
And they play on Friday.
Yes.
Now, Monday, after the SEC tournament ends on Sunday, Monday is Memorial Day. It is also Selection Monday for college baseball. So that's when we will find out whom LSU plays in its regional next weekend, and who they're matched up with in the Super Regional, and if they're top 8 or not. So
we'll know if they're a host, but we won't know if they're a top 8, if that makes any sense.
So I find it very interesting. LSU, as we've said, is kind of the consensus number one team in all of the polls. But D1 baseball has its field of 64 projections, and they have LSU as the number 7 team. They have them much more on the bubble for that top 8 seed. That's why I think, we talked about it's probably important, just try to win one game this weekend, cement that, get that secure, because it doesn't matter if you're 1 or 7. But I do find it interesting. They have LSU playing against Miami of Ohio, so Miami of Florida and Miami of Ohio. And then the number 2 seed they have, very interesting, is Jay Johnson's old team in the Arizona Wildcats. This would be very intriguing if that was the matchup.
Yeah, that would be absolutely intriguing. I haven't done like a deep dive on Arizona baseball this season, but they've played some SEC teams. They played them back in Houston. I think they played Tennessee, and Tennessee beat them pretty handedly. And they've had a pretty. They're a good team.
Just from the Jay Johnson standpoint.
Yeah,
though,
from the Jay Johnson standpoint,
he's
obviously,
got to know a couple of guys who are there from recruiting and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be very. The plot would be very thick. I think that's the best way to say it. So, there's a whole bunch, there's a couple, Big 12, Big 10 teams that they could face up against that 2 seed. There's a plethora of ACC teams. Oh my God. There's tons of ACC teams that they could potentially play in that spot. There's one that's already in that spot, in the 3 spot in Miami, but maybe that 2 seed's NC State, maybe it's Louisville, maybe it's, who knows, and then there's teams that are not in major conferences who are probably going to be 2 seeds that they could play. They could play Southern Miss. They could play Northeastern. Northeastern's won 24 straight games, and their team ERA is under 3. I only know this because I'm a Massachusetts guy, but they've won 24 straight. They're 45-9, and they've been on an absolute roll. But UC Irvine's another example of these teams. Southern Miss, the LSU played them in a regional at Southern Miss 3 years ago in Jay Johnson's first year. So there's a whole bunch of different options. Right now it's Arizona. That's probably more random than anything else, but that would be very juicy. But the fact that Arizona's even on the 2 line
Yeah, I mean, the way that these things work, we all know from college basketball bracketology. Like, just because somebody puts it out there doesn't mean that anyone's actually thinking that. They just had to put somebody there, and maybe they see the storyline. I'm actually more interested. Not that the 2 seed's not important, because these teams could beat LSU. LSU this is not the team from 2 years ago that's just like a juggernaut. That they're going to have to play well. But I am just as interested in finding out who they're matched up with in a potential super regional. Because you look at, and again, just looking at this mock bracket, 7 seed LSU would match up with 10 seed Coastal Carolina if the Chanticleers won their regional. But there are some other very intriguing possibilities in that sort of range. Like Oregon's the 8 seed, Oregon State's the 9 seed. Those teams could be easily opposite LSU. You look at some of the others. Florida State, a team that LSU played a super regional against not that long ago.
Coastal Carolina, like the history there too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's all these, there's these SEC teams. Like if Tennessee gets itself back into a number 1 seed conversation, you could,
or if they're just winning their 2,
yeah, or they're the 2 and they win, or Florida's a 2 and they win their regional or something.
Yeah.
Like,
that'd be dangerous.
I kind of think you don't want an SEC team in that situation.
You don't. No, you really don't. Just because you know how talented the conference is and the familiarity and all that sort of jazz, especially if you played like Tennessee, who you literally already played. So, I think you'd much rather play a team that's outside the conference, especially since, there's so much talent within this conference, and not everyone can be a 1 seed, So, do you really want to be facing a team that might be as talented as you are, even if they haven't had as good of a season as you have? And granted, you'll be at home and you've been winning these series at home, but it's not something you want to be.
It just takes one bad weekend.
Yeah.
And that's the case against anybody. But
that's true.
Especially against a Tennessee or a Florida or somebody. It wouldn't even necessarily take a bad weekend. It could just take kind of an average weekend, and they can beat you.
But you'd rather face a team like Coastal Carolina that hasn't faced Kate Anderson and Anthony Ianson back to back like that, you know what I mean, and are not used to facing those caliber of pitchers, with any sort of consistency, And I have no offense to Coastal Carolina, it's a fantastic program. They won the national championship, all that sort of stuff, but they're just not facing those 2, or Zach Root and Gage Wood, or like Marcus Phillips and Liam Doyle. They're just not used to facing that sort of 1-2 punch, and maybe they win their regional facing that one of those sort of 1-2 punches, like Tennessee, for example. But if I'm LSU, I'd much rather face a team that is going to be more prone to your studs.
Like if we're hoping, if you're an LSU fan, you're hoping for something. That I think that's what you're hoping for, is to not have an SEC team in that, or certainly not one you've played already. Florida's maybe a different story, or
Florida has a ton of injuries too.
Vandy is probably not. Vandy's going to be a top 8 seed also, so that's not even a possibility. But you probably want a different conference team to be matched up with in the Super, because the line of demarcation between what is a good season and what is not for LSU is so clearly Omaha.
Yeah,
and that's a high bar. We understand.
If it's a good season, if you get to Omaha, it is not.
It's not if you don't. And so that's why there's just so much emphasis on that. And I think having to play at Tennessee again, or in Arkansas again, or someone else is please no.
Arkansas is going to be a top 8, so they'll avoid them too. Thankfully for that,
and that's true. That's true. Arkansas won't be. But speaking of that, last thing on this: if LSU should lose on Friday to Auburn or A&M, Mississippi State, whoever they play, if they should lose on Friday, are they still a top 8 seed?
Yeah, I think so. Because
do they have to sweat?
I mean, maybe a little bit, but I don't. I just don't think so. They'll have too many quad 1 wins, too many their RPI will be at least high enough, or at least in contention for it. I know the strength of schedule, especially the non-conference strength of schedule, isn't quite where you want it. The RPI isn't at 4, so where you really have that major cushion, right, between that and 10, for example. But whoever they lose to, it's not going to go that. They're not going to drop that far, So that's part of my thinking here. So I think they're pretty much locked in at this point.
And some of the other teams in that range who are kind of on the bubble, like your Oregon States, your Coastals, they're not playing tough games this weekend either. If they should lose a game, their RPI may drop more than LSU's does. I think they're safe. Although the more I think about it, the more it's maybe you just want to win one. You'd feel a lot better about yourself Monday morning.
Yeah, probably.
If you won a game on Friday and then, kind of.
And again, I think it's a good thing to get Anthony Ianson on the mound against real competition, in between your last regular season game and the NCAA tournament,
Because keep in mind, his first start in the regional may come against a 4 seed or something that is like you do want him to kind of stay up against competition.
Anderson will probably face the 4 seed if I had to guess. But actually, we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know for sure.
Coaches play games with that rotation all the time.
Well, also,
discussion
I mean,
for next week.
our only major data point on this is Paul Skeens starting against Tulane. Even though Tulane had won 15 games all year, they still threw their guy against
they kept
that
him
team
on rotation against.
So
and that team.
It worked
kind
out.
of had questionable pitching depth in some ways.
Yeah, that team had more questionable pitching depth, exactly. So they still did it.
That's an interesting point. And that'll be a discussion for next week. I do want to wrap things up with a brief mention of the LSU softball team, though, Koki. And I don't... I mean, this is like picking a scab to a certain extent for LSU fans. I know that. But this is... Talking about baseball, this is the kind of thing that can happen in a regional. LSU was the number 10 seed?
Yeah, overall seed.
The overall seed in the NCAA tournament. And they were eliminated in the regional with 2 losses to Southeastern. So congrats to Southeastern, first of all. But this was not a good performance for Beth Torina's team.
No.
They not only do you lose to Southeastern twice, but then you watch Southeastern turn around and get run ruled twice by Nebraska, who won the regional. I don't know what to say. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've followed every LSU softball game over the years, but this is a pattern now for Beth Torina that a team that performs well in the regular season fades, and they come up short of Oklahoma City and even short of a super regional once again.
Yeah. Just really disappointing stuff for another program that expects to be in Oklahoma City pretty much every single year, right? So
and it hasn't been in years
now.
Yeah.
So, because of that, and it's not like there's not talent in Louisiana. There's still plenty of talent in the state for softball. So, it's pretty disappointing stuff if you're an LSU fan. And I was covering the baseball stuff this weekend, so I wasn't able to watch. But Southeastern, it's not like they won the regional. It's like they're on. It's not like they've continued the Cinderella run either. I mean, they got run ruled by Nebraska, right? So it's not ideal.
Was it James Madison in softball a couple years ago that went on this big run? And I know Liberty upsets Texas A&M. They won the regional. Southeastern again beat LSU. I think they lost 14-1 to Nebraska. Turned around the next day, beat LSU again, and then they lost 10-2 to Nebraska or whatever it was. I mean, they were not competitive in their other games, and so something clearly went wrong for LSU. They were undefeated for a long time. They were top 5 in the country halfway through the season and just faded. As I said, they were 10th overall and now
and this
out
has
in the
happened
regional.
for a couple seasons in a row now where they're undefeated for 20-odd games, and then things fade really quickly.
So, I would encourage you, go to theadvocate.com/LSU, read Scott Rabalay's column about the softball program. He talks about the future of Beth Torina, who, again, ordinarily you look at her record and say, oh, this is not a coach you would get rid of or anything. But given the expectations and given the postseason failures, I think at the very least she goes into next season feeling some pressure. And Rab writes about that. We're hoping to have Rab on today, but he was otherwise engaged, so no problems there. But go read his column, and I think it's fodder for discussion further.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's going to do it for us today. Koki is going to go to Hoover and watch LSU play SEC tournament baseball on Friday, possibly on Saturday or Sunday too. And then on Monday, we will have an NCAA regional bracket. Maybe we'll do a live reaction podcast. Maybe that'll be the ticket. We'll do a little Memorial Day special.
Yeah. I'll be at the selection show. I mean, maybe we could do it from the selection show.
You can pause your cookout to watch our show about LSU's regional berth on Monday. So until then, Amelia was our producer. Koki, Zach, we'll see you next time on the LSU Sports Insider Podcast.